My name is Carlton Cartwright, and I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And today is January the 15th, 2022. And we're here today at the Hilton Garden Inn in Tampa, Florida. And Miss, what is your name?
Michelle Denise Lacey.
Okay. And what branch of the service were you in?
Air Force and Air Force Reserve.
How long did you serve?
26 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're also here accompanied by her daughter today, Dania, and who her mother's very proud of. As a parent. Okay, so what year did you go into the service?
In 1988.
And you said you went into the Air Force, correct?
Yes, I did.
Why did you choose that branch?
Well, I have an uncle who was chief in the Navy. And he told me, you can't join the Navy, you can't join the Army, you can't join the Marines, and you can't join the Coast Guard. And I said, well, that leaves the Air Force. He said, that's right, that's the only branch you can join.
Okay.
So I wanted to join because my mom, she was raising all four of us by herself. And she worked 2 jobs, and she had my brother and my younger brother paying for their college.
Right.
I didn't want her to pay for mine. So I was looking for a way that seemed more interesting to me. So I chose the Air Force to join because I knew they were going to pay for my college.
Where were you at the time?
Chesapeake, Virginia.
And what were you doing before you went into the service?
I worked at a movie theater, and then I also worked at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay. All right. You became an officer?
Well, that's later on. I came in enlisted.
Right.
And went
Where
to
was basic training?
San Antonio, Texas.
How long was it?
6 long weeks. But it kind of went by fast after the first week. The first week was slow, getting to know everybody.
Right.
But after that, it was pretty long. And things I remember at basic training, of course, is the snake pit. You remember the snake pit? That long table where everybody yelled at you if you messed up. And then I met some interesting people at basic training. Some I have pictures of, but I don't know where they are. But I remember the most memorable thing I can remember about basic training is when you have to go through the obstacle course.
Right.
And we were going through, and me and this other girl, we were the shortest people in our flight. And they called her the mouse because she was 5 feet, and I was only 5'3". So they had the rope that they swing to you, and you're supposed to jump on the rope and go across the water. Well, I jumped on the rope. They said no matter what, you jump on the rope. So I jumped on it, but it was on the end, so my feet was dragging in the water. And they were like, get off my rope. And I was like, but, I said get off my rope. So I let go of the rope, and I'm like doggy paddling. I'm drowning. He said, what? I said, I'm drowning. He said, stand up, Aaron. And I stood up and the water came right here. So everybody just clowned me from then on. They were like, you're drowning. So that was fun.
All right.
And so then I graduated from basic training. But before I went into basic training, I went into the Air Force to be in air traffic control.
Okay.
But in basic training, I had a violation, and they said a violation is when you talk in your sleep. And of course, I didn't know that when you get anxiety or whatever, or stressed out, you talk in your sleep. So they were saying that people were having conversations with me in my sleep, and they said, well, if you want to do this job, you have to get rid of your anxiety, which means you need to stay in basic training until they can cure you. And I was like, oh, no. What else? What's my other choice? And they said, change jobs. I said, I will change jobs. I just don't want to stay in basic training any longer. No more yelling at. So I ended up switching to traffic management.
Okay.
So, TMO, and that's where you ship all your household goods, and you get plane tickets, and you ship blue barks. You know what a blue bark is, right?
What is that?
A blue bark is a deceased Air Force member in a military uniform.
Okay.
So learned about that. So that was my first job, and my first assignment was Barksdale Air Force Base.
Where was tech school?
Tech school was San Antonio. Wait a minute. Base training was San Antonio, And then tech school was in Texas also, but that was in Del Rio. No, that wasn't Del Rio. It was the other base in Texas, because we rode in a bus to the tech school, and the tech school was 6 or 8 weeks as well. I can't remember what base that was in, but it was in Texas.
Okay. How long was that?
About 6 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
And I was in the choir. I was a red and white rope in the choir, which means you got a chance to leave and go sing.
And did you?
Yes, I did. We sang at promotion ceremonies and retirements, and we learned the Air Force, most of the Air Force song, but we learned the medley, all the branches, the military medley.
Right.
So that's what we sang.
Okay. Okay. So, where was your first duty station?
First duty station was Barksdale.
Okay. And how long was that tour?
The tour was originally for 4 years, but I ended up staying there for about 2 years. That was, and my first commander was Tommy Williams, and he was a major, and best commander, well, I'd say one of the best commanders. And having him, I realized he shaped my Air Force career because he was fair. If somebody did something wrong, he did it the fair way. You know, he listened to all sides of the story before he, kicked them out or gave his opinion. But he sat and talked to the person and wanted to know, their side of the story before he, rendered judgment.
Right.
So I felt, he's a pretty good commander.
Where was your next duty station?
So after I left Barksdale, I went to Rhein-Main in Germany. And they were closing Rhein-Main after I got there. And I had only been there a couple of months when they had decided to start closing it down. So I was there, I was supposed to be there 2 to 3 years, but I was a senior airman, and they were getting rid of people, but they weren't replacing them. So Harry, I'm a senior airman doing a job with a tech sergeant or master sergeant, and then doing a job with 2 or 3 people around me. So that was pretty busy for us because we were closing the base. And my second commander was Major Davis. And if it wasn't for my first commander, I believe my second commander, I would have gotten out of the Air Force because of how he was. And but
Well, was that a discrimination issue or?
It was more or less when I applied to become an officer. I got approved. All my paperwork went through, but before I could get through the approval process, my package sat on his desk for about a week or so. He was the last person that needed to sign off on it, and I overheard him talking on the phone to my ROTC instructor who had accepted me into the program. And I heard him, and I was on my way to the bathroom, and he was telling him that I didn't want to do that program. So I stopped at the door, and I'm like, because I heard my name, and I was like, I didn't want to do that program. What's he talking about? So I walked slowly past his door, and he goes, oh, here she is now. So I just think that, God had timing on all of that. And he called me in his office, and the commander on the phone said, well, did you not sign the paperwork and say you wanted to do this program, but your commander is telling us differently? And I said, no, I signed up for the program. I don't understand what's going on, but I still want to come to your program. So then after that, he signed the paperwork and released me to join the program. So I got approved, and then 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave, he called me into his office on a Sunday. And in Germany, nobody works on Sunday, even though after we started closing down, they try to at least let you work Saturday and give you Sunday off. We worked 12 to 14-hour shifts.
Right.
We were busy closing down. So he called me in on a Sunday, and he said, I need to see you. And so I'm thinking something's wrong with my mom, something wrong with my brother, something happened.
Yeah.
Because, you normally don't go in on a Sunday. And I said, so we went to his office, and he says, well, I've requested that your package be denied. And I was like, you requested that my package been denied even though it's already been approved and I'm getting ready to get my household goods picked up? He said, yeah. He said, you and your family can go ahead back to the States, but I'm going to request that you stay here. I said, okay, so my mom's okay. And he said, yeah. I said, so nobody in my family is sick? And he said, no. I said, so, okay. I said, so can I request that your request be denied? And he said, well, you can, but I know what kind of officer you'll be if you do. So I was like, oh, okay. So he says, because we're so undermanned here. I said, so because you're undermanned and you're not replacing me, you know, and I know I'm doing the work of 3 or 4 people, I'm going to make a bad officer because I've been approved to become an officer. So that didn't make sense to me. So on Monday I came to work and I requested that his request be denied. And it took them a couple of days and they're like, no, your commander, we're denying his request. So they approved for me to be released. And then I got out and I tried to go to college, but I got pregnant with my second son because I was married and just doing all the things, trying to get ready to go to school. So I waited, and then after a while I wanted to go back in because I just didn't know, you know, I got out to get my commission and then I wasn't going to school. How am I going to do certain things? So I came back in as a recruiter. Well, that was an accidental, you know, it's God again. I had joined the reserve to come back in so that I could slowly finish my last 2 years of college. And because I was working on that, and I was recruiting people, and I was sending them to, and didn't know. So one day I got a phone call, and they're like, is this Sergeant, you know, my last name was Massey at the time, and I said, yes. I said, this is Sergeant, it's the guy in the picture with Colonel Mungavin. It says Sergeant Shaw, and I said, okay. He said, did you realize that you're recruiting people for me? And I said, no. He says, but you are. This is the 3rd person that has come in my door because of you. And I said, oh. He says, have you ever considered becoming a recruiter? And I said, oh, no, not me. Not me. And he says, well, I think you should consider it. And I said, okay. He said, well, I want to meet you. He said, so come on down to my office. He said, have you and another person that's been doing the same thing? Y'all been recruiting people and not realizing that you're recruiting people. And I said, okay, let me go look into it. I just didn't think. So, because I was on orders at the time. So I went to his office and he told me the ins and outs of being a recruiter for the Air Force Reserve.
Right.
And I thought, this sounds like a good deal. AGR program, never heard of that before.
Right.
And that's when you're pretty much on active duty and you get an active duty retirement at the end of your total 20. So I said, okay, all right, maybe I can still get my commission then, you know, and work hard and do that. So pictures I shared with you is when I went to tech school to become an Air Force Reserve recruiter.
Okay.
So that was 4-week class. And so I got to tell you about the dream. So before I left to go to school to become a recruiter, I had a dream that my office was near water. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to be near water and I'm going to be a recruiter. Okay. So I get to tech school, and our first week in school, they said, okay, next week you're going to get your assignments, and we're learning and everything. And so we got our first assignment. And they're saying, okay. And I was telling everybody, I'm going to get an assignment someplace close to water. And they're like, well, how you know? I said, because God said so. So they said, okay. So our first assignment came out, and it was like, you're going to be somewhere in North Dakota. I didn't know the name of the base, Chenault or something. And I was like, is that near water? And everybody's like, no, that's not near water. And I said, okay, whatever. So we're going through class, you know, everybody started setting up their basic their household goods to be picked up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll get to it. I don't have much stuff to pick up, and I'll get to it. It's no hurry. You know, they were looking into housing, and they were looking into schools for their kids, and everybody was, you know, getting ready. So 1 week before we were supposed to graduate, Sergeant Townsend, he's in the instructor in the picture, came to class and he said, I got good news and I got bad news for 2 of you. And I didn't say anything. I just said, okay. He says, well, 2 of you, your assignment has changed. And I said, okay, where am I going? Is it near water? And then he says, well, we're going to discuss it after we have, after lunch. So everybody else in the class was mad. I mean, out of the 8 or 9 of us, they were all mad. I wasn't mad. We went to lunch, and I'm like, you gonna eat that? Just, you know, not that I was hungry, just they weren't eating. And I'm like, oh man, my wife has already looked into a job over here, and man, I can't stand it. I can't stand, better there be me. And I'm like, okay. So y'all ready to go back to class? They were not happy at all. So we get to back into class, and I raised my hand, and I said, so where am I going? And he looked at me, he said, how do you know that it's you? I said, I just know that it's me. He goes, yeah, it's you. You're one of them. I said, okay. So where am I going? You're going to Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. I said, and everybody in the class said, is that near water? Because that's what I used to say.
Right.
And they said, yeah, it's near water. And he said, and exactly, the base is actually on the water. And I said, oh, okay. See, God ain't never failed me yet. And they're like, oh. I said, okay. So when I get to class, to my first that assignment, Master Sergeant Sandoval was my supervisor, and he said, okay, your office is not going to be on the base. You're actually off base, right outside the gate. And I said, okay. So he took me to the gate, to my office, and when I walked into the gate, into the office, and I stepped outside, and I looked down the street, and I saw the ocean. So I could see the ocean from, my office, and that's exactly what I saw in the dream. I was like, okay, God, okay. So I go in the office, and the phone isn't ringing. So my supervisor's telling me, okay, this person has been gone out of this office for like 9 months. There's no leads. And when I graduated from basic training, from tech school for being a recruiter, I had all this negative, oh, you're going to the worst place in America to recruit, basic trainees, and they've never had anybody, they've never made gold out of that place. And they've never, people down there can't pass the ASVAB. I'm hearing all this negative stuff. I'm like, well, God's sending me there for a reason. And now, to me, I was the lowest passing person out of school, out of that recruiting school. Mm-hmm. It was like everything was delayed a week for me, and I don't know why. It's like everything I learned last week is what I learned this week in my head. So I was always a week late. And I said, I know what they're saying didn't make sense to me, but the Air Force Reserve made sense to me. It just made sense. It was like you're getting something good in serving your country, and you don't have to do it full time. And they're going to pay for this, and they're going to send you here. And I just knew all the good things. So I'm thinking, okay, all right. So after a week or so of being in the job, and all this negative stuff started coming back to me, I just prayed. I said, okay, God, the phone's not ringing, nobody's coming in the office, I have no leads, you got me here for a reason. And when I finished that prayer, the phone rang. I was like, oh, okay, God, you're here again. So I picked up the phone, and it was somebody, and they were asking questions, and I said, okay. So I said, God, you keep me on this road, I'm going to bring people in, because I'm doing the best because I believe in what I'm doing. So, long story short, I became Rookie Recruiter of the Year, and nobody else that graduated from my class, they weren't Rookies of the Year. Not only did my office get our quota before the end of the year, we exceeded quota. And it was the very first time in the history of Keesler Air Force Base ever making gold. So it was like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I got promoted to tech sergeant, and then 2 years later I got promoted to master sergeant. And I got a phone call one day and said, hey, you're down there being a recruiter. How would you like to be a line recruiter? Now that's never happened either. A 2-year recruiter, barely there, and they're like, we need you to come, we want you to come be a line recruiter. So that's a promotion to master, and it's a move. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I talked to my family about it, and they're like, okay, we'll go. So we went to Dover Air Force Base, and that was pretty interesting. It was cold up there. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I started thinking about my future and when I'm going to retire and what I want to do when I retire. And I said, okay. I looked at the pay of a Chief Master Sergeant, and I said, this is the highest, and this is the highest I can make enlisted. And then this is the highest amount I can make as a major. And I looked at the pay rate of the major, and I looked at the pay rate of a Chief Master Sergeant, and I said, I can retire as a major. I can do that, and then have to do nothing. So if I don't want to when I retire. So I looked into the best way to become a commissioned officer. So I found a position, and they're like, find your own position in the reserve, and I found one at Minot Air Force Base in Missouri. No, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri.
Okay.
So they accepted me as a logistics officer, and because criminal justice, I finally got my degree as a criminal justice person. I like criminal justice, but I like being in the military, and I'm like, I didn't really mind what job I wanted, but I like being in logistics. So I submitted my paperwork to my then supervisor, and I have to say that for most of my career, I didn't have to really deal with racism a lot. I knew it was there, but in the places that I worked, I didn't really see it or didn't feel it.
Okay.
But this one person, I felt it. You know, my first kind of sit-down interview with him was, oh, okay, you're a line recruiter now. You know, I see you came up and you did this. But, you know, the person that used to work in your office, it must be true that once you go black, you don't go back. And I'm like looking at him like, what does this have to do with me doing this job? You know, and because she was a Caucasian woman who married a African American gentleman, and I don't know why it was none of my business. All I know is I'm here to do a job. And he would say stuff, a little sarcastic, snooty stuff like that. So when I decided to get my commission, of course, I had to talk to him and say, hey, I'm gonna go take the AFOQT because I want to get my commission. Well, you do know, well, my brother, he didn't pass the test, so don't be surprised if you don't pass it, because he is a pilot in the Army, something like warrant officer or whatever, and when he tried to take it for the Air Force, he didn't pass the test.
Okay.
So you don't be surprised if you don't pass it. So I was like, okay, there's no encouragement there. There was just total. So when I passed the test, the look on his face was like, oh, you passed the test? And I'm like, yeah. So now I'm just trying to figure out when I'm leaving, you know, just kind of happily leave. He started all this drama towards me before I could get out. He wrote me up because I didn't come to a picnic, and he called it an official function. Well, I was living on base and I had entomology at my house. So that was an official function. It was either go to a picnic or be there for entomology. And the base commander said, what's more important? You be at your house for entomology than to be at a picnic for a going away party. So he wrote me up and said that I missed that formation. And so it's like, no, he was trying to get me on something.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I'm gonna go report you to, you know, to the legal office. And he goes, well, we don't have to do this, you know, we need to sit and talk about this. Because it was like he was trying to find a reason. Every time I turned around, I was like, okay. So I finally got out of there, and I went to officer training school.
Right.
And that was in Tennessee and McGee-Tyson. So that's when the Air Force Reserve was getting trained at the same time as the Guard. And that was 6 weeks as well. And I have to add in that my family took care of my two sons while I was gone. And I feel like without them, I wouldn't have been able to go through, you know, Air Force officer qualifying school.
Without what?
Because they took care of my sons while I was in. And so while I was there, I met one of my closest friends, Christina Hills, who we still talk almost every day now. And she wasn't in the same flight that I was in, but how we ended up being friends was somebody would come up to me and say, Hills. And I turn around and look at her, oh, you're not Hills. So I just said, okay. So next day, it'd be like, Hills again. And somebody finally came up to me and said, you know, you look like this girl named Hills in B flight. And I was like, okay. So I got to go find her, because when they gave us free time, we had too many people calling me her. So when I met her, I saw why. She was only like 2 inches taller than I am, but we had the same physique. And I walked up to her and I said, hey, Hills. And she looked back and she says, are you Lacey? And I said, yes. She says, okay. She says, people call me you. And I said, well, people call me you.
Right.
So we became friends there. She showed me where her dorm room was, and I met her roommate. And her roommate was going to be a pilot, so it was the first female pilot that I met for the military, you know, actually talking to.
Right.
She was a really nice lady. And then I took her and showed her where my dorm was. So anytime a kind of function or anything we had going on, it was she and I were together. So people weren't saying, "Oh, you're Hills and you're Lacey." They kind of knew.
Mm-hmm.
So when we graduated from officer qualifying school, she's in New Orleans, and then I went back to Langley. I did days there at Langley, but my assignment was at Whiteman.
Okay.
And I went to Whiteman in the wintertime, and it was -6 degrees. I've never been in a place so cold. And they're like, to take your PT test, I'm like, okay. It was just too cold. They wouldn't let us, I mean, it was icicles felt like coming down, and they couldn't let it, the stealth bomber was there, so they couldn't let the plane fly. It was so cold, and they were using de-icers. It didn't work. So I was doing logistics there, and I learned a very valuable lesson. It wasn't me, but I saw the lesson, and that was when they started saying, you know, when you leave your computer, make sure you take your CAT card out, because if not, people have access to your computer.
Right.
So one of the guys was playing a joke on another guy, and that didn't turn out too well. Because he sent him an email and said, you know, I've been looking at you from afar, and I'm a fan of yours, and I really think that. So when that first sergeant saw that email, oh, he was pissed. He was not having it. And he was fussing at the guy. The guy didn't know what happened. So the person who typed the email had to admit, you know, he left his CAC. So I've never left my CAC after that, because it was like, you don't want somebody to act like they were you. So then from then I was at Langley, and I was trying to get days instead of doing one weekend out of a month. They would let me combine my time at Whiteman, so I wouldn't be flying back and forth. So I came on orders, and I was looking for a job at Protocol at Langley. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting out of my car, and I was straightening up my hat, and I had on my little lieutenant bars, and I was walking to go in the building, and there was this lady, this major, standing there, and she pointed at me and she said, "You, come here." And of course I'm walking over and I salute her. I report like I'm in basic training. She goes, oh, she's laughing, and she's like, oh, you don't have to report. Where are you going? And I told her who I was and where I was going. I was going to go and interview for a job in Protocol. She says, when you finish that, come up to the 3rd floor. And she told me where to go in room so-and-so and come talk to me. Right. I said, okay. So I went to Protocol. I got that job. And I walked over to talk to her. And her name was Major Basadeva. And that's her godmom. Okay. Today. Love her to bits and pieces. And she said, so I don't care if you got that job downstairs Protocol. I want you to work for me. She said, you look sharp in your uniform. And she says, and I like that. And she says, you know, you can tell a good thing about a person. If they're sharp in their uniform, they're not going to be lazy, you know, when they come to work. Right. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, okay, so go downstairs to Protocol and tell them you're not coming to work. And she told Colonel Brown, she told Colonel Brown and the other colonel, y'all are hiring her. And there, of course, I'm like, she's a major and he's a full bird colonel. And Dennis Green was his name, Colonel Dennis Green. And Colonel Brown worked, so all it was Colonel Dennis Green, and then Colonel Brown was a lieutenant colonel, and then she was a major. And she went to both of them and said, you're hiring her. This is my lieutenant. And that was it. I was her lieutenant from then on. So then she was funny. She was a really good boss, you know. And she didn't have any kids, and she had this big Suburban. And we were driving, and I said, she drive crazy. She drive real fast. And I said, why do you have all this big car? She said, because I got 9 kids and 2 dogs, and I needed this space. And my eyes were like, 9 kids. I
Right.
Kids.
Hello.
And so she looked at my expression and she just fell out laughing. And she goes, I'm just joking. I don't have any kids. And I said, oh, okay. So then when I got pregnant with my twins, Dania and David, I told her, I said, well, my kids are your kids. And it's been that way ever since. They're 14 now, and she's their godmom, and she's the best person ever. And so after I left there, I got an assignment at U.S. Joint Forces Command in Suffolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And I was the deployment officer there. Loved that position because I got a chance to be to actually do actual hands-on deployments, and I became part of they call them elite teams of like 11 people that you have to be prepared to go within 24 hours to whatever needs to be done.
Right.
So we went to Haiti when they had that earthquake. My team went to Haiti, but they sent me as a logistician to Miami.
Okay.
So for 6 or 7 months, I worked out of Miami. And the greatest thing about that is I met a lot of people, and I got a chance to bring my family. So I got a house down there, and I stayed there, and I supported them from Miami, my group that went forward to Haiti. So after that, when we came back, I came back to Suffolk, Virginia, continued to work there. And then I got into a car accident. So as a reservist, and that was February, and my twins were 3 years old, and their birthday's in December. So I got in a car accident, this lady just ran right into the back of me. And then caused all kinds of neck and shoulder injury. Didn't know, so my doctor didn't know when I would be doing that job. You have to be able to carry your own suitcase and your own luggage, and they wouldn't let me carry over a certain amount of of luggage. So they're like, when my doctor said they didn't know how long it was going to take me to become healed, I couldn't be on that team anymore. So they offered me, they said, okay, well, you can go to support U.S. Transcom, which is a part of U.S. Joint Forces Command up at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. I said, okay. So we left for Scott in May or June of 2010. Or was it 2011? And we stayed there until February of the following year. Now, I thought white men was cold. Scott had extremes. They would be 105 degrees with tornadoes coming and real hot. And then it would be really cold to where you felt like negative 26 degrees. And they're like, oh, this is warm. Last year it was negative 39 degrees. And I'm looking at these people like, oh my gosh, this is cold, very cold. And it felt like somebody was sticking needles in the part of your ears that was bare to the wind. So it was crazy cold. So then the funding ran out, or was going to run out while I was there. So they said, well, you have a choice. You can either go to Tampa, MacDill Air Force Base, or you could go, I think they were offering me a position back at Langley. And I said, no, I want to go to Tampa, because I like Tampa. So in February, March of that year, it was 13, they sent me to MacDill. And I was in I was at MacDill, and I was in the Joint Forces Command there as well. And I worked with contracting. And then after that funding went out, while I was working that position, I got a chance to go to Las Vegas. And that's where I got a chance to meet some of the Tuskegee Airmen and take pictures with them. And that was just sitting down and talking with them, being a part of history was great. I need to go back one time. There was another time in my life that was really significant in the military. And that was on September 11th, when the planes ran into the Twin Towers in New York.
Right.
I was recruiting, and I was driving my recruits. I was getting ready to go to the MEPS. I had 3 people in my car, and I got a phone call from my supervisor. And he said, come back to the base as soon as possible. Drop them off and come back. And I said, okay. I didn't ask questions. I just dropped them off, and I came back. And he says, go find some place on base and lock down. So I went to the exchange because I hadn't had breakfast yet. And that's when I saw it. I was standing there and I was watching it on TV. And I just stood there because I just could not believe what was going on. And they were talking about it. And I was like, just stood there. Because I just remember that point in my life was like, I'm recruiting people to help support our government and our way of life. And that was just the most, what's going to happen now? What are we going to do? So that was really significant to me that, that was going on. So then, another significant time was when I was in tech school learning to be a logistics officer, and that was during Hurricane Katrina. We were locked down, and then after that, for that weekend, they said, go do what you're going to do. Well, I organized a food drive and a furniture drive from the base, and I took it out to people in the community.
Right.
So that I could be a part, and I just didn't want to be there and not do something, because I've always been organizing and doing something for people as much as I could. So then back to Joint Forces Command at MacDill. So then after that, those funds ran out. I became a professor, aerospace professor at the USAF. So I was teaching Air Force ROTC. I liked that. That was a good job. I just didn't like getting up at 3 o'clock some mornings to go out and have them run. I had to meet them there by 5, so I had to get up at 3, to be there by 5. But I liked teaching, the students, and I liked connecting with them and explaining to them, the good and the bad about the military. It just made sense to me. So then after that, those orders were running out too, and I'm like, okay, God, where am I going now? So then I got a phone call from Colonel Davis, because I applied for different positions to go on as an AGR or full-time orders for a year or more. So he was up at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency in Virginia, in Springfield, Virginia, I believe. So I went up there and I was a contracting officer there, and then those orders ran out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But before those ended, I got a job at Andrews Air Force Base, and it was working for the commander of the base. And then I started working as a IG. So I've had plenty of jobs. I forgot to add that one. As an inspector general. I learned a lot about the military and the people, and that their complaints are valid, and that some things you don't know what's a complaint until it happens. So after that, I came back and I got a job with Miss Cynthia Cook at Tampa at MacDill. And I was the records management officer for the base. And I was still a reservist, but at this time I had my assignment was in Germany. And so I was supposed to go to Germany for the summer. And I was ready to go, but then I didn't have childcare. And so it was either try to find another relative to take my kids, which I couldn't find one for the whole summer. And there was no way of taking them there with me. So I asked my commander, can I take them there with me, or can I continue, or can I come later? And he was like, no. So I ended up getting out. So I made it to major. That was the highest I wanted to go to.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And but throughout, I had more great days, and I can't say bad days. I met more great people, nice people. I didn't really meet too many negative people, shall I say. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I would, because my kids, my oldest son is Lee. He joined the Air Force, and then right behind him, my younger son joined the Air Force, Brandon. They did 4 years, they got out, but their experiences have them to, that Air Force experience that they had, it got them to where they are now. And they're both very successful in their careers. And then hopefully my daughter, Dania, will possibly follow in mom's footsteps. But if not, I think the whole experience of having a military mom and military family is a positive on her. Because, go ahead and say it, you know, your friends say, oh, your mom's retired, you know, so I'm there to support. And the other thing about being in the military for me was that my mom, since she was so busy all the time, she was working 2-3 jobs trying to support us, being in the military, it gave me the opportunity that when my kids went on a a field trip for school, I was always there. I could say, hey, I need to take this half a day or this time off to be with my kids.
I only have one more question for you.
Okay.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yes, it helped me to see that we need the military and that only a certain percentage of Americans volunteer, you know. So, and when they do, a lot of them serve with their whole heart. And they're not just there for the money. They're there to support their country.
Okay.
Just like me.
And one more little one. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
I volunteer. It makes me a volunteer. It makes me trust in God a whole lot more. And right now I am involved with veterans, helping veterans of Hillsborough County.
Okay.
So we do a lot of giving back. And it helps me in the future. I want to build homes for homeless veterans.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for a very well-prepared interview.
You're welcome.
Good job. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else that you want to add?
I just want to say thank you for doing this, because I think it's important that we have, you know, this, and I tell my family, you'll see us sometime in the future. You'll have a recording of it, even if I'm long gone.
And that's what it's all about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's done. That's off.
I tried to cover everything.
I don't think you missed anything.
I don't think I missed anything.
And if you did, it's not your fault.
Nope, it's not my fault. In fact, I wrote a book. It's called Air Force 101, and I'm gonna putting it out this year, in 2022, and it's called Air Force 101. Everything you've always wanted to know about the Air Force and the Air Force Reserve, but never knew to ask.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's because so many people join the Air Force and they say, my recruiter didn't tell me. If you knew, you would have asked and they would have answered it. It's just so many things to go through.